Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
Mickey, why are you holding the digit 4 up? It's scrawled on a piece of paper. Why are you holding...
You don't know, do you?
Apparently not.
It could be the cut I get of the new $8 Parrot Room tier.
Oh,
Or it could be what I hear is the number of reconciliation bills that Chuck Schumer is planning to cram through the Congress.
Well, you know, it's funny. I was wondering, like, what could be of less interest to the average viewer than the $4 cut you get from the Parrot Room.
Right.
And you just provided the answer. Thank you.
No, people piss on the focus on reconciliation and process, but that's what's really important now in terms of will Biden be the new LBJ and FDR, or will he flame out? And the answer is it all depends on how much Schumer can ram through Congress with the barest of majorities, and doesn't look like he's going to get a change in the filibuster.
Nope.
But he did get this ruling from the parliamentarian that lets him do more than one so-called reconciliation bill dealing with the budget, allegedly a year. And nobody's seen this ruling. He won't show it to people. He's keeping it secret. Nobody knows why he's keeping it secret. And you know, there are rumors going around, and the rumor I heard was that he's going to try to do 4. It's very, very complicated, but that means he could do both parts of the infrastructure bill and have 2 left over to do a bunch of other things, which would be huge for him if he could keep all 50 senators in line. So it's and that's a large number, 4. Everybody said, well, maybe he'll do 1 more. No, if he does 4 this year, that's a big deal.
I thought you promised last week not to mention the word infrastructure within the first few minutes of a podcast.
I did not.
You didn't?
That was for the...
You know what? I think that maybe actually that was inadvertently captured by us on audio. You know, we had that version that I failed to stop recording at the right time, and so people heard a little post-production crosstalk between us. So I will let them decide whether or not.
Let's not do that again.
Let's not do that again. It's actually in my hands whether that happens again. I would remind you. Now, first, I should quickly say that Parrot Room allusion was to something we will discuss in the Parrot Room. All the more reason for people to sign up in the the Parrot Room at patreon.com/Parrot Room. Yes, Mickey, what were you going to say?
I didn't go. Just don't make me go Lonesome Roads on you. You know.
I don't know that allusion.
Lonesome Roads there's a movie which I've never seen. One of the great movies. I think it's a Frank Capra movie about a demagogic TV personality, not unlike Bill O'Reilly, named Lonesome Roads, and he's wildly popular until the techies conspire against him. And after he thinks they shut off the mics, he says something like, you know, that'll keep, like what the famous New York guy said, that ought to keep the little assholes quiet for a week or something. And he was destroyed. So that's the denouement of the movie.
I think you've said enough things in the course of ordinary production time to get destroyed. I don't think you need to go overtime for that.
And yet here I am.
And yet you're still standing.
I thought I destroyed myself last week with my musings on why people might not want to hire.
That was in the Parrot Room. You sure you want to go there here?
Oh, no. If it's in the Parrot Room, it stays in the Parrot Room.
It stays in the Parrot Room.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the only reason you didn't get canceled is because we have a very tolerant audience in the Parrot Room.
Probably. Anyway, that's... I think this 4 thing, if it's true, is a scoop, Bob, but we don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's true.
Once, you're always so far ahead of the curve, we have to wait for America to become interested in the things you're saying. And when they do, we will replay this part of this, okay?
America is interested in reconciliation.
Yes, in a certain sense, but
Don't
not that one.
Isn't. Don't tell me it isn't.
Not that one. So what else? I mean, we could talk. Well, wait. There was a news flash that I would think you'd be interested in right before we taped. I don't know if you saw it.
Didn't.
There had been kind of inklings of this, but Biden is going back on his vow to increase the number of refugees accepted this year. He was going to up it from like around 15,000, which is, I think, kind of close to Trump's number, to 60. He had said he would. He had promised. I think he had even notified Congress that he would. And now he's saying he's not going to. And I'm a little unclear on this. It's apparently not the same as, this isn't connected to the people seeking amnesty at the border. Refugee
Correct.
status is different. These are people from all around the world. Seems to me kind of odd to do it when he's just announced that we're leaving Afghanistan. I would assume there's going to be a fair number of Afghans who are now looking to follow soldiers back home. But in any event, do you know what the deal is here?
This is not news to us immigration people, Bob. We've known about this for a week or so.
There have been inklings.
But no, Mark Krikorian of Center on Immigration Studies wrote about it a week ago. The point is, it's a rare case of Biden feeling the political heat. He's taking so much heat on the border that he felt pouring salt in the wounds by raising the refugee limit would be too much. That doesn't quite make sense.
No,
but that's the reporting on it, that the optics would be bad. He can always increase it later. He can always have a special program for the Afghans. It's not that many people. There millions of people are going to be sneaking across the border in the next year. The 15,000 or 65,000 UN vetted refugees who are from around the world aren't such a big deal numerically.
Well, I would have thought the politics would work the other way. In other words, that he is going to have to find a way to crack down on the border. And for that reason, he would be looking for something to throw to the progressive, to the progressive side. Say, well, at least I'm letting in an extra 45,000 refugees. That's not a very big, that's not hard.
That wouldn't satisfy the progressives, but I agree. Your scenario seems just as plausible. Might have to do with just the personnel that are in one place or another. He's stocked the border with gung-ho, progressive, let-them-in types, and the State Department may not be filled with such people. He may also feel he can stiff the State Department human rights groups in a way that he can't stiff, Latinos, although he's lost a lot of Latinos with his border policies too, notably Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from a border district. Your scenario is plausible, but it doesn't seem to be the one he's following. So maybe he's not gonna realize the error of his ways at the border.
Well, in any event, this seems like a not entirely implausible segue to Afghanistan. We now have a deadline for withdrawal.
Okay.
And
just to finish up with the border, since you brought it up, Bob, not me.
I brought up refugees.
Okay. No, okay. Well, anyway. It's pretty clear now that Biden's policy is to process these people, get them in as quickly as possible, and that's, of course, going to encourage more people to come, and he shows no signs of not doing the same thing for them. So the net result will be hundreds of thousands and probably millions of more people, mainly from countries to our south, who are in America. You can say that's a good thing. You can say it's a bad thing. You could say it affects wages. You could say it has political ramifications. But that's where he's headed. And that's what the debate should be about. Do we want that outcome? Anyway, go ahead.
So is he doing nothing to stem the tide?
He claims to be doing two things, at least. He claims to be dealing with the root causes. Yeah, don't hold your breath for that. Economic and political change in Central America, and he claims to have gotten. He seems to have gotten some commitments, possibly very watery, from Mexico to send 10,000 troops to clamp down on their southern border to stop them there, and he claimed to have agreements with Guatemala and Honduras, but they both denied it. So that doesn't mean they don't exist. But it's not an auspicious sign that they're going to be very effective if the countries aren't committed to them. So basically he's doing half-assed things to block them in the South, but that doesn't come near to actually blocking them, given the fact that he's letting them in once they get here.
So on to Afghanistan. I would just point out that the president you voted for, Donald Trump, repeatedly said he would pull our troops out of various countries. He said he'd do it. Get them out of Syria. He tried. He failed. He said he'd get them out of Afghanistan. He didn't. the president I voted for, Joe Biden, it looks as if he is actually going to get the troops out of Afghanistan. What do you have to say about that?
Well, at least Trump didn't put more troops into Syria. Overall, I don't think. He may have pulled some out and put them back, but I think the total didn't really rise.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
He didn't go along with the plans to increase our troop presence in Syria.
He did say, we are here to steal your oil.
Right.
Which apparently we are doing, but I don't think you're supposed to say that. Anyway, as for...
First, there's apparently some wiggle room in terms of special forces, troops we don't really acknowledge that are there. Bizarrely,
in Afghanistan?
Yeah. Bizarrely, I saw a debate between, a story on discussion with Petraeus and McRaven. And McRaven, I think, was saying, General McRaven, saying, well, we really have to keep a small position in Bagram Air Base. And if we're out, we're out. I mean, we don't have a small position in Bagram Air Base, so that doesn't make any sense. The second thing is we're reserving the right to pulverize them using over-the-horizon weaponry.
That's what alarms me. And I actually got a lot of traction for a tweet. Well, you retweeted it.
I retweeted it,
You retweeted
Bob.
one of the two tweets in my little thread.
How am I not supportive?
Yeah, no, I couldn't ask for a better nemesis than you. But yeah, that's worrisome because for one thing, well, it's worrisome to me for a reason that wouldn't occur to many people in the foreign policy establishment, which is that, it's not legal to be like dropping bombs on countries and killing people there. That's considered an act of war. You're not allowed to do it to just any country you feel like doing it to. But the other thing is, like, we say that we are going to do it to keep Afghanistan from becoming a base for anti-American terrorists. Well, actually, there are two things about me. First of all, if you look at the actual kinds of terrorism we have faced in America, jihadist terrorism, since 9/11, it has been, by and large, homegrown terrorism. The most recent spectacular examples being San Bernardino, I guess, and Pulse nightclub, both of which I think helped get Trump elected. They both occurred in the year prior to his election. Now, almost invariably, when the people who do the homegrown terrorism of a jihadist kind tell us why they did it, they mention the fact that we're killing Muslims in various countries, and they often mention Afghanistan, Iraq, etc. So the truth is, the kind of terrorism that has been most of a threat isn't the kind that actually originates from some foreign base. It's the kind that originates at home, but is motivated by the fact that we have that we are killing people in these majority Muslim countries. So that is a problem I have. That's only one of two. I could proceed, but I'll pause.
Well, weren't we invited in by the government of Afghanistan to pulverize them over the horizon?
Well, I mean, it's true we could be in the short run.
So how does that violate international law then?
Well, that's before the Taliban takes over the whole country, Mickey. I mean,
how do they decide which government is the official government for international law purposes?
It's a good question because, right now you're right. It's one that would authorize us to do it. But that, first of all, that leads to my other concern, which is that this over the horizon stuff could well become a way to continue this war under the guise of anti-terrorism. In other words, Biden is not going to want to see on his watch Kabul actually fall, right? So, and if we can say, well, this is kind of anti-terrorism stuff, but it's actually keeping the Taliban at bay from the point of view of the Afghan government, well, they'll be willing to call it anti-terrorism. We'll call it anti-terrorism. So it could be we wind up giving them much the kind of cover we now give them, but which, by the way, I think is mainly aerial stuff as a practical matter to begin with.
Why?
And so the war won't actually end.
Okay, but that's not an international law question.
No, that's not. I mean, you steered me toward what is what now my third reason. I mean, if the government falls, I mean, the most plausible scenario in which we need to, quote, keep it from becoming an anti-terror base for terrorists is if the Taliban takes over, right? I mean, I think that's what they're kind of nominally. That's the kind of scenario.
Well, I think they're worried that the Taliban already controls a large part of the country, and there are already Al Qaeda bases there in so-called ungoverned areas.
There's Al Qaeda bases all over the place. There's Al Qaeda bases in Syria that are being armed by our supposed allies. I mean Al Qaeda affiliates.
It seemed implausible to be reading just the articles I read that the Kabul government wouldn't fall. I mean, the record of air power alone in sustaining a government is, when has it worked? Did it work in Kosovo? I guess it did work in Kosovo, but that's sort of the lone example I can think of where air power alone did the job. And so it wildly increases the chances of hitting the wrong target and destroying some wedding parties and doing more harm than good. So it seems a little bit wishful thinking to think we're going to preserve the government in Kabul.
Well, I think air power has become more effective over the years as the bombs have gotten smarter and smarter, and you've got drones, and the surveillance can be better. And so I don't think it's nothing. And in fact, again, I think it's a large part of the kind of support we're giving them now, because I don't think we're sending our soldiers out in harm's way all that often. And that's why I worry that in principle, we could wind up doing much the same thing we're doing now without any troops on the ground. What,
that doesn't bother me that much.
No, of course it doesn't bother you. I mean,
it bothers you because because homegrown terrorists cite the example of Muslims being killed.
Well, that is in fact the only kind of actual jihadist terrorism threat we faced in America that I'm aware of for the last couple of decades.
Or is it because you don't like the death and carnage?
I don't like the whole American policy of constantly killing people in so many different countries that you can't even keep track. It's just bad. And you know, it doesn't help. We've been doing it we've been in Afghanistan for 20 years. Obviously, we're not helping. Things haven't gotten better, you know? And so why would you keep this up? This is clearly a situation where if long-term stability is to happen, we're just going to have to leave it to the people of Afghanistan. We left it to the people of Vietnam. That is now a stable place, and they kind of like us, as I understand it, which is good.
They were a nice old-fashioned bunch of communists, though.
Well, is that my problem? Is that your problem?
Well, it may be that not every country left to its devices will have the Vietnam outcome.
Well, that's certainly possible, but you know, it's the closest recent parallel we have. I'm just sick of all the forever wars. Yeah. It isn't our business to be killing people all over the world, and it does. If you could show me signs it's doing any good, let me hear the evidence where have we actually helped things.
Colombia,
not with drone strikes.
Isn't the greatest threat in terms of war not Afghanistan at all, but the prospect that both Ukraine and Taiwan could fall to Russia in the first case and China in the second in Biden's term? Those would be big, either humiliating defeats for American foreign policy or big actual wars.
I don't think Ukraine's going to fall. I think what's going to be consolidated probably is in effect the division of Ukraine between the Donbass, which is and that's what I think the Russian troops currently massing along the border are just trying to drive that point home.
There are different theories. One theory is that they really want to control the Black Sea. Although, why is it so important to control the Black Sea?
Well, maybe they're only the warmest water they have direct access to. Is that not right?
Right. I guess that's right. Is it?
Although they've got Crimea.
They have Crimea already, so why do they need to control the whole coast? The Is everybody accept the fact that if Russia takes over eastern Ukraine, we're not going to fight?
You can find, I'm sure neocons who would want us to fight. I think it's they have de facto control. I believe it's more or less controlled by their proxies.
Yeah. So it's just for Putin's internal consumption, to keep Putin popular in an era where he would otherwise be falling in popularity?
Well, I don't think you should underestimate the extent to which he finds the encroachment of NATO genuinely threatening. Remember, it has been immensely expanded since the Cold War to, in some cases, come right to his borders, and in some cases come close. And he would like a buffer state. This is what countries do. They like buffers. They like, especially when, look, we're speaking on a day, I think, or in the week when Biden, levied some more sanctions on Putin. So it's not as if we're acting real friendly.
Stupid question. Revealing my ignorance. Ukraine is not a member of NATO, right?
No, it's not. It would like to be.
So why isn't it a buffer already?
Well, because the most of it is very Western friendly. It seeks admission to NATO, and it could get it. And if it gets it, Russia would rather that not all of Ukraine get it, right? For there to by then be an actual division between East and West.
That's a good point.
A remarkable number of things that nations do make sense if you actually look at them from their point of view.
Well, there's a summit coming up. Presumably Biden and Putin will hash it out with empathy and compassion.
Maybe. I don't know how Putin is going to react to these sanctions. Just quickly, one of the absurd things about... these sanctions, and some of them are token, but there is also... we're restricting the government's access to capital markets, which is serious business. The ruble actually fell a little in response to this. And first of all, that's another example of probably, I haven't looked into the details and dynamics, but of the U.S. abusing its centrality in the world's financial system in ways that will come back to haunt us. And using that as leverage for unilateral sanctions. But the other thing is, what these sanctions are for is apparently two things. I gather one of them is that Russia supposedly supported some anti-Biden talking points during the campaign on social media. So I don't know the details, but I think it's about the 2020 election, right? And first of all, I just think it's kind of unseemly for Biden to retaliate for what was actually some fairly modest initiative that was against him. It just seems kind of petty. And the other thing that the sanctions are for is the SolarWinds hack, which, assuming it is being properly attributed to Russia, is still exactly the kind of thing we do all the time. It was a particularly successful version of it. It was on its scale impressive. But we have long made a distinction between, just infiltrating computers, taking information, doing surveillance on the one hand, which all the big nations do, and we all know it, and then B, actually attacking things, taking out power grids. They didn't do that. So it's a weird... I don't think we've ever sanctioned a country for doing exactly what we do in the cyber realm, so that's kind of weird.
Isn't the first thing also something we do? Spreading anti-Biden talking points? Don't we spread anti-Putin talking points?
We don't spread anti-Biden talking points, no.
No, but don't we spread anti-Putin talking points?
Yeah, no, there's certainly Russian elections in which we've gotten kind of famously meddlesome in, certainly one involving Yeltsin. And then, of course, Putin considers what we did in Ukraine, which was, I thought, reasonably, well, it was arguably worse in the sense that what resulted from our efforts, to the extent that our efforts mattered, was an actual coup, not just the outcome of an election. So yeah, that's their view, is that we and all these these NGOs we support, and we're supporting in Ukraine at the time, that we see as, fostering civil society, Putin sees as something else. So
Very, very similar to Mark Zuckerberg's NGOs in Georgia and Pennsylvania and other states, which he sees as fostering civil society, and Republicans, with good reason, see as fostering democratic victories.
There is that difference in perspective.
Just an aside. Did you read that Walter Russell Mead article I sent you?
I had my attention had already been called to it. I had glanced at it, skimmed it, and thought he's a crazy alarmist. He's an interesting case. He's got this perch at the Wall Street Journal, which I guess, which makes sense ideologically. I don't think he's a classic neocon, which the Journal kind of classically is. Let's see. The global storm clouds are darkening. That's a great first line, by the way.
He basically thinks we're asleep at the switch while we're about to be challenged big time by China and Russia. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so he's complaining about troops massing on, and Navalny's health. I will say, I don't think look, I'm on Navalny's side basically, but I don't think his health, if that's what Walter's concern is about, is being improved by the hunger strike he's on, right? That could have something to do with his declining health. And I guess so what is, I guess maybe Walter's saying, well, they should let him out of prison, submit to his demands, let him out of prison.
What did he do that was illegal or wrong? That should be illegal. He's against Putin. So.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of him being let out of prison, but I mean, I'm not shocked that, given the fact that they put him in prison, they're not. They don't want a hunger strike to be the reason they let him out.
It's not clear that the things Meade proposes would actually stop China from invading Taiwan if they really wanted to.
Look, the idea of defending Taiwan is crazy. We would lose. I heard on Aaron Mate's Pushback podcast, I heard a professor from the Naval War College, which is to be commended, by the way, because I'm always hearing professors at the U.S. Naval War College from just various various kinds of perspectives. It's not like, some kind of militaristic group of scholars, right. And maybe that's true of all the... But anyway, he estimated that we would lose, if we actually fought over Taiwan, we would lose in between 2 and 4 weeks. It's right off their shore, and they really care about it. It's nowhere near us, and we don't really care about it. We are not, in the long run, going to prevail. Now, so, there is this push from, the usual suspects to get the U.S. to, declare, to change long-standing doctrine, which is strategic ambiguity, kind of hinting that we might help Taiwan, but not saying it. There are people who want to change that and say, we will defend Taiwan. But if you do that, you're giving China the option of either calling your bluff and humiliating you in a war, or calling your bluff and showing that you were bluffing. Do you want to put that kind of power in China's hands? Up to you.
Well, they sort of have the same power now, right? If they invaded China, we would either be humiliated or we would be defeated under your lies. But
no, because we haven't said we would defend Taiwan.
But we've half said it. We've been ambiguous. The Taiwanese are certainly hoping that's true. When has China been successful in a military venture? I remember the North Vietnamese kicking their ass. Their army is sort of untested in actual combat, isn't it?
China was a peasant society back then. I mean, they are now, technologically on the cutting edge. Their military is advancing rapidly. And even if it's not quite there yet, even if this professor from the Naval War College is wrong, then give them 10 years. They're never going to give up. They're never going to give up. I mean,
that would be the argument for having the war now. If they don't know how to use these weapons now, and in 10 years they will, let's have the fight now.
I mean, remember how this started, okay? This was a civil war. The losing side retreated to an island that was already part of China. I don't think it had been part of China for very long, but it was. It was part of China, I believe, at the time. So, this is a misleading analogy in many ways. But if retreating Confederates had retreated to Hilton Head or something, after losing the mainland, there would be a lot of political support within the Union for eventually saying, sorry, we want the whole place. This was American territory before you retreated there, assuming Hilton Head was. I'm not defending it. I would hate to see it. I would like Taiwan to remain independent, but it's not, it's not as if China has set its sights on all these countries it plans to invade. I mean,
my point
Taiwan is in a special category.
You can't assume the prowess of the Chinese military.
Mickey, there's just no way we would prevail enduringly unless it went nuclear, and then that would be, since they have a fair number of nuclear weapons, that would be catastrophic.
Well, you could defend it long enough for China to have a revolution from within. They still want to control Taiwan, but Taiwan might be a lot happier rejoining a China.
I mean, if you want to start talking triple bank shots, also they could, aliens could come down and save us. But
you have no hope of the China reforming from within. It's
Mickey,
here to stay.
This is something that's important to understand. The majority of Chinese people are very fond of their leadership. Okay?
Right, I'd say there's a chance that will change.
Well, not the way the U.S. is handling things now. We keep giving them a reason to feel nationalistic by and by the way, this little venture in Anchorage, where, Blinken and Sullivan got on their high horse and started, and in the run up to the damn meeting, they had been doing things that they knew, would rub China the wrong way, and they get up and they show off and they do their virtue signaling, and the Chinese give them a shitload of blowback. I'm telling you, that does not make China less likely to invade Taiwan. Okay, if they had gone there and played nice and said, let us just tell you something that's really important to us for political reasons, don't invade Taiwan, they would have a much better chance.
Yeah,
and I might say the same thing about Putin. It's like, when you put political pressure on him to save face by, levying these sanctions and restricting the government's access to debt and stuff, and Biden calling him a killer, okay, but it doesn't make it less likely that his troops are going to enter Ukraine. Believe me.
Right. I have two big non-foreign policy or medium-sized non-foreign policy topics to talk about.
Okay, there's one foreign policy thing I want to get back to later. Israel did attack Iran, blow up some shit. But
let's do one of my domestic ones,
sure.
And then we'll do Israel. The Major League Baseball move to protest the Georgia election law by moving the All-Star game from Georgia. It echoes what happened before with transgender bathrooms, when the head of Salesforce declared, "We're the CEO party. We get to make the laws by threatening to pull out of a certain state or do this or do that." And that seems very troubling to me in the terms of the unelected CEOs unelected by the voters, CEOs of 100 big corporations. Not just exercising their voice, but actually exercising power to punish states that don't do what they want, and to promote states that do what they want, and in this case, to punish states that go on the side of one party or another. It really is veering alarmingly close to the corporatist model of governance. Not so much that they're corporations, that's not why it's corporatist, but because it's inegalitarian, and it has sort of the corporations being the brains and power of society, analogous to what the brains are in a human corpus. And that's the economic model of fascism, of course. Hitler getting together with the 100 biggest corporations in Germany is not that far off from if Biden got together with the 100 biggest corporations in America. And of course, he didn't have to do that in this case.
Wait a second. Well, I want to make sure I understand that last sentence. You're saying when you say Germany is not that, you're saying Nazi Germany is not that far off?
Correct. The model of corporatism is sort of governments allied with the big businesses to control things in a way that's not necessarily democratic. Doesn't necessarily help small business either. Doesn't reflect the will of the voters. Reflects the entrenched power structures of society acting to reinforce their entrenchment. And so, Biden wouldn't. There are three airlines that Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, who organized this call of 100 executives to talk about activism, corporate activism on election laws, said, I have all three airlines. What are you going to do? Start your own airline? You have no power. Okay? So it's not like it relies on the fact of oligopoly power to entrench like three corporations instead of the traditional model of capitalism where there are 1,000 corporations and they're too big to meet in any one room. There are only three of them. They can meet in one room and they can plot against you. It's hard to see how you would stop this with laws. It's very alarming. It's hard to see how you stop it with laws. Stopping him with consumer blowback hasn't happened. Nike profited from Colin Kaepernick activism. It certainly wasn't stopped. And the woke people who are behind all this have all the money. I mean, there's a reason deplorables aren't a major consumer force because they're deplorable. They don't have much money. I don't quite see how you stop it. It is. I vaguely remember in the campaign finance debate, somebody, and I think it was the Supreme Court, pointed out, it's one thing to say individuals have the power of speech and rich individuals have the power of speech. Marty Paris can take out ads to say what he wants. That's fine. But these corporations only have access to all this money because they happen to be sitting atop a pile of money that consumers gave to them. They didn't necessarily give it to them.
But wait, I thought you previously supported the Supreme Court's general disposition that corporations spending money on any kind of messaging they want is free speech.
No.
Really? I thought when it came to campaign finance reform, you said it was basically futile because Citizens United was fine.
I've sort of since revised my instinct. One of my instinct is you can probably one problem is how do you define what a press organization is? In other words, the Washington Post Corporation certainly should have the right of speech. How is U.S. Steel different? What if U.S. Steel starts a newspaper? Can U.S. Steel then, exercise for its First Amendment rights? And I tend to think you can probably segregate off journalistic organizations and say, okay, you have free speech rights, but you got to just be you have to be journalistic. You can't, and you have campaign contribution rights in a way that corporations don't have. Okay, but the other thing is they could have. I think they could have come out with a middle ground that said, for example, there's a possible line that for-profit corporations can't give contributions and nonprofits can. Also, there are specific anti-corporation rules in place that are still constitutional. Corporations still can't give money directly to a candidate. An individual can. Maybe that the basis for that has maybe been eroded since Citizens United, but it's still good law. So
but Citizens United provides a separate avenue that's very much like giving money to the candidate. You just do ads on the candidate's behalf, right?
Right, but the point is that there is a formal restriction against corporations that has been upheld. Why hasn't it collapsed?
Well, okay,
and independent expenditures are probably not as effective as direct expenditures anyway.
Well, I mean, I share a lot of your concern. I mean, as we said last week, as I said or implied, I'm not a fan of this, what Major League Baseball did, and the whole idea of corporations getting, commercial organizations getting deeply involved in politics in this way, especially, professional sports, which, as I said, used to be a unifying thing in America. It was a common denominator of discourse. And it seems a little puzzling to me, as I said last week, that they would want to start the fight. A theory I've heard since then is that baseball is desperate to bring the younger demographic on board. But they're alienating some of their traditional audience, some of their TV audience, not necessarily the ones who show up at the park, but that's not all the revenue source by any means.
What I heard was just the players weren't going to show up. I mean, they were not going to have a game because the all-star players themselves are a little woke, and they fell for the propaganda about Georgia, and they weren't going to show up, so they weren't going to have a game.
If that's what's going on, that's a very different dynamic from the one you're concerned about broadly, which is people who run corporations colluding to influence politics.
But it's with this that was true with Major League Baseball's decision to move the game. This 100 corporate CEO phone call to decide how we're going to be activists on voting rights is a different kettle of fish. I mean, imagine it was the other way. Imagine if the corporation said, we hate gay marriage. We're going to punish any state that allows gay marriage, okay? Or we hate the fact that felons can vote. There should be a punishment for felons. We're going to punish any state that loosens the laws on felons voting. The left would obviously go berserk, but I think they would have a point.
Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, one reason I don't like this, I mean, we can all imagine circumstances that we would consider so dire that we'd be happy for corporations to get involved, right? Like on foreign policy, the South African apartheid stuff comes to mind, and I'm sure you and I would both say, well, if Jim Crow laws were still in effect, that would be a worthy cause. But by and large, I'm not. I mean, literal Jim Crow laws, leaving aside the question of whether some of these are metaphorically Jim Crow. One reason I don't like it, and again, I don't understand it. Like Coca-Cola, you would think used to have a lot of Trump voters drinking their beverages. So A, I don't totally get it, but B, I don't want to see an America where you can literally see which kind of soda people are drinking and guess who they voted for. Like, and that is where this leads, right?
Yes, and the irony is that Sonnenfeld justifies it today in Politico on the grounds that, well, corporations like to promote harmony, so they're just promoting harmony between all the races and their diverse workforces and the transgenders that want to use the bathrooms, and whereas to outside observers, it looks like they're being quite divisive. I mean, Kaepernick's thing did not bring Americans together; it divided Americans, and this is just buying into a Democratic plan to make the Georgia voting law, which is sort of not that radical, make that a flashpoint of division. Make that that's a wedge issue on the part of the Democrats, and
I mean, I'm against.
Makes no sense.
I'm against the Georgia voting law, and I'm pissed off that they're trying to pass all of these voting laws on the premise that there was widespread fraud that got Joe Biden elected, which is
what
bullshit.
Is it that pisses you off?
But I don't think corporations should get involved.
What is it that pisses you off about the Georgia voting law? I understand this is a separate issue.
Well, as I said, a lot of it is just the premise. I mean,
but look at what it does, not why they did it.
Well, it reduces. I support Democratic candidates by and large, and it will reduce. Well, actually, I mean, there's controversy over this. Bill Scher says, if you look at these laws closely, they don't so clearly favor they don't so clearly favor Republicans. But I do not like to see Democratic turnout suppressed or reduced or whatever you want to call it.
What if the Democrats were boosted by some sort of, not saying it happens now, but boosted by some sort of ballot harvesting scheme that involved going to nursing homes, rounding up all the ballots of old people, filling them out, and depositing them yourself with minimal approval? It'll help the Democrats. Are you for it?
Show us that this is happening on a significant scale, and then we'll
talk. You can't fight the hypothetical.
If things are widespread enough, there's evidence of them. That's the way it works.
I'm asking you a hypothetical question. Are you just
if you can show me this was or
do you have any principles at all?
No, if you could show me this was a huge problem, fine. Yes.
Okay.
I would still say you should be able to give people water while they're waiting in line. But cheap shot.
It's not a huge problem. It's not a huge problem yet. But
now on this corporate thing, you saw that your man J.D. Vance got into this and got some blowback, right?
I did. I didn't quite understand that he was really saying corporations that disagree with me should pay higher taxes than corporations that don't agree with me.
Well, he was either saying we should punish all corporations with high taxes because some corporations did these things he considers supportive of the Democrats, or we should only punish those that support my political opponents, and that is creepy in exactly the way what you're talking about is creepy. In fact, it's the same thing. It's the government and corporations entering into a kind of, the government using corporations to do its bidding. Well, not the government. I mean, the political party that's in power using corporations to do its bidding is just the flip side of corporations doing the bidding for one of the political parties. Well, it's all the same thing.
He would say he's holding them neutral. I think. I don't know if that's tenable, but he would say...
Well, which thing do you think he meant?
He's looking for a legal remedy where there may not be one.
Look, if he meant, I want to raise taxes on all corporations, well, good luck getting the Republican nomination. I doubt he would say he meant that. And if, when pressed, he would say he meant what I think is the only alternative. He wants to punish specific corporations that he doesn't approve on political grounds with high taxes. Well, that's creepy as shit. If he should be president, let's ask him to clarify.
We should ask him to clarify. The irony is, of course, that if you really wanted to punish the corporations, you wouldn't raise the corporate tax rate because nobody quite knows who pays the corporate tax rate. We don't think it's the actual corporate shareholders or CEOs. You would just go right after the CEO salaries you're straight and say, okay, CEOs, over $500,000 a year, you pay a tax rate of 50%. Fuck you. Well, that would be a much more targeted sanction against woke corporate America than
it would be more targeted. But corporations must think they pay some of the corporate tax because they keep moving operations offshore to places that have lower tax rates.
Well, it has an effect in the international context, yeah. But after they've moved it offshore, have they paid a huge price? I don't think so. In terms of will the CEO's well-being go up or down, I think it has a minimal effect.
They are insulated from all misfortune. They get rich regardless of what happens with their corporation.
Nobody knows who ultimately pays the corporate tax rate. It's probably passed mainly on to consumers and workers.
Could be. It is certainly, some of it is certainly passed on.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think really smart economists have looked into this and have been unable to come up with an answer. So I think it's... Whereas the income tax, we pretty much know that the people earning the income are paying the income tax.
I will tell you who's paying my income tax, yeah.
Even the Parrot Room income.
We'll get to that in the Parrot Room. Good tease.
Pretty sly plug by Mickey.
You're getting better at Parrot Room promotion, which is good because I'm growing increasingly weary for single-handedly shouldering the burden of Parrot Room promotion.
Well, I get blowback for doing it, so I don't do it.
Who do you get blowback from?
My friends.
You get better friends. I mean...
That's like telling me I should found a new airline so I can avoid the woke 500. Okay, go ahead.
Speaking of your friends, I was going to say something quickly, Tucker Carlson relevant.
Go ahead.
Just my bit of media criticism of the week. So this is a piece in the Washington Post about, the headline is Tucker Carlson villainizes journalists on his top-rated show. Then the threats pour in. And there was apparently this person named Zadrozny. Do you know of her? Anyway, Daryl Beatty, you're my acquaintance in passing, and you're either acquaintance or friend. Acquaintance.
You've had more FaceTime with him than I have.
Well, not in person, but by Zoom.
Okay.
He was on Tucker Carlson's show. He says about this person, Zadrozny, she's up to no good, and then blah blah blah. basically so she can ruin their life. Now, the story is she gets piled on and her life becomes miserable, but this is what I want to complain about.
Who is she? What has she done?
It doesn't matter for our purposes, and I failed to copy-paste that part of it. But here's what I'm going to complain about. So the Washington Post piece, quote Beatty saying basically, so she can ruin their lives. He says that about Zadrozny. Then the Washington Post reporter says, this was a fundamental misinterpretation of Zadrozny's work. Blah, 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 which is included reporting on individuals who discuss the blah, blah, blah. It wasn't worth the trouble to get here, but I just want to say, when I was a boy, the way a reporter would have handled this, instead of saying this was a fundamental misinterpretation of Zadrozny's work, would have said, Zadrozny says this was a fundamental misinterpretation of her work, and then lay out exactly the same evidence. And because the idea was reporters are reporters, not judges. And my own view is that if you keep things in the voice of the reporter and not act like you're the damn judge and tell us who's misinterpreting whom, then you will actually win more people over to the perspective you want to win them over to.
I agree with that. You're very old school, Bob. But I don't know what Zadrozny does. Does she dox people? What does she do? Does she? No, she got.
Well, Beatty is complaining that she. I don't know. As I said, it's irrelevant. I'll spell it and people can Google it. Zadrozny.
This is Kafkaesque, where we have her on trial and we don't even know what she's charged with.
Speaking of which, people should check out my podcast with Alex Wolfe, whose grandfather was the first person to publish Kafka. And Alex's book is super interesting. I'll only say that. It's high up in the Wright Show podcast feed.
My grandmother hung out with Kafka, buddy.
Really? Well, maybe look. Honestly, your grandmother could know Alex's grandfather. He was a very eminent German publisher.
Probably does. Is he the guy who didn't burn Kafka's manuscripts as instructed by Kafka and decided to publish them instead?
I doubt it. His journal published Metamorphosis. Yeah. And he was also a big book publisher in Germany.
Kafka didn't have a whole lot published in his lifetime, I don't think.
Well, Metamorphosis was Kafka was apparently he apparently didn't like the idea of being published, according to what he told my friend's grandfather.
Yeah. So we don't know what this Beth Zadrozny is. Is she an employee of the Washington Post? Is she bigger than a bread box?
You're just trying to deepen my humiliation. I don't know, and it's not that relevant. Zadrozny, to me, is a mystery. This is the main takeaway from this. I find Zadrozny a mystery.
Whatever it is, I denounce her.
Okay, can I... there's other stuff happened. Can I quickly complain about Israel?
Yeah, no, it's your turn.
I mean, I almost goes without saying, but they... the Iran nuclear talks were just starting to pick up momentum. And so, actually, this is related to identity politics, so you'll like this. So, Israel blows up a power supply for some centrifuges in Iran. Apparently, it wasn't like a cyber attack. It seems to be. Fred Kaplan of Slate reported that it was an actual bomb that was just there to be detonated whenever Israel felt like it. Well, the moment they chose to detonate it was like on the eve of Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense, being there in Jerusalem and doing a media appearance with Bibi. And so that, now we say, the U.S. says they were not aware that it was going to happen, in which case you might argue that it wasn't very considerate of Israel to time it so that Lloyd Austin would have to stand there next to Bibi Netanyahu and not complain about it because, the Biden administration no doubt judged the political blowback from complaining about Israel to be unacceptable, even though it's pretty likely they weren't happy about this at all. So anyway, you can already see things I'm not happy with about Israel's behavior. But then, so Bibi's there with Lloyd Austin, And it's just a short thing. They don't say that much. And Bibi just goes on and on about how we will not let Israel get a nuclear weapon. We'll do whatever it takes. So he's basically just reinforcing, just if there's any doubt at all that we did this, like we did it, okay? And, you know, Lloyd Austin is not going to complain about it, believe me, because, you know, what I want to... Yeah, go ahead, and then I'll hit you with the identity. I had a brilliant identity politics marketing scheme here, but go ahead.
No, so it was just an attempt to sabotage the Iran talks, or not?
Well, yeah, it was an act of war. They blew shit up. It was a violation of international law, but above all, it was a sabotage of a U.S. diplomatic initiative that we place a lot of value on. And this is not the way allies are supposed to treat each other, right?
Well, Israel has always done that. If they don't make any bones that they oppose reopening the Iran deal, right? So we're doing something that they don't want, and they're doing something to Iran.
Right,
that
but you'd think they'd have the consideration to give us a heads up, given the timing.
We don't want a heads up because then we know ahead of time, and it's our responsibility for not stopping it.
Try us. Why don't you try giving us a heads up and see what happens? We might try to talk you out of it.
Yeah.
That's the other thing they might not like.
What's your identity politics point?
My identity politics point. I mean,
it was brilliant. You can't have forgotten it.
This isn't serious, I suppose. But
you want my tinfoil hat? I have it here.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't go beyond. It doesn't go into that territory. It's it's just that, like, you apparently can't get. I mean, I did a tweet saying, does anyone know of anybody in the foreign policy establishment who has complained about what Israel did? Act of war, sabotage American diplomacy, blah, blah, blah. No names. That's how hard it is to get people interested in this. Whereas if it was any other country in the world, of course, you know, if Saudi Arabia did it, there'd be a lot of people complaining about humiliating Joe Biden and so on.
How does it really hurt us? Doesn't it strengthen our hand in the negotiations? Iran can say, you know, if you don't give us what we want, we're just going to crank up our uranium centrifuges. Oh wait, they just blew up. I guess we don't have that card to play. So why is this something that if you were negotiating you would be upset about?
Well, as you just said, it's a card they can't play. That was the idea.
Right, it strengthens our hand and weakens their hand. That's a good thing to have.
This is hilarious. So. Your premise, is it your premise that when there's a negotiation between two parties, anything that strengthens the hand of one party makes the deal more likely to get done?
No, but the question is, would we be pissed off? And the answer is we're probably not pissed off that some centrifuges blew up. I mean, and in a negotiation, you couldn't end up here or you could end up here.
But if you accept...
And if your centrifuges blow up, you're more likely to end up with a favorable outcome.
Well, wait, what are you defining as a favorable outcome? This is a case where there may well not be a deal. America wants a deal to happen. Israel doesn't want a deal to happen. You're saying this makes a deal more likely to happen, in which case we have to ask about Bibi's judgment, right? Why did he do this?
Why does it necessarily make it worse, unlikely to happen?
Well, run this by me again, how it makes it more likely to happen. All you've shown is that it theoretically strengthens the bargaining hand of one party.
Iran more desperate to get into a deal because the financial costs of staying out of the deal are still there, but the benefits in terms of being able to ramp up production of nukes are no longer there to the same degree because the centrifuges blew up. So therefore...
So it makes our bargaining position stronger and theirs weaker.
Yes.
Why would that make a deal more likely?
It might make it more likely, it might make it less likely.
That's my point. Which thing are you addressing? That it strengthens our bargaining?
It more likely.
I'm talking about the likelihood of a deal happening, okay? So you're showing that it strengthens our hand is no more relevant than you're showing that it strengthens their hand. In the absence of additional information, the fact that it strengthens one party's hand doesn't tell you anything about how likely it makes a deal.
If you were the U.S. negotiator, would you like their hand to be weaker or stronger? Gee, let's make it stronger so we have more of a chance of making a deal. No, you'd like it weaker.
If I were a U.S. negotiator, I would like a deal to become more likely, not less likely. Now, we've just said that the reason Bibi did this was to make it less likely, and you're saying now that he's just a fool and doesn't know what he's doing, and it actually makes it more likely.
Well, haven't we been saying that Bibi's a fool for decades?
Not a fool, no. He knows what's good for him politically.
Sometimes people miscalculate.
No, he knows what's good for him politically. What's good for him politically is for there never to be a deal, for Iran to always be an enemy, for him to always claim they're an existential threat. That's what he wants. Right. And he's not stupid.
I'm just raising the issue that maybe it was not such an anti-U.S. act as you think it was.
Well, he certainly considered it something that makes a deal less likely. So unless you think Tony Blinken is lying when he says he wants a deal, and you know him better than I do, you've been to a rock concert with him, then the rest follows. Whatever I was going to say, and the rest of that sentence.
Surely there's a balance, but it makes a deal less likely, but it makes the deal, if you getting a more favorable deal, more likely. So if you're the U.S., you have to balance those
But see,
risks,
the thing about this whole thing is, it's pretty, if there's going to be a deal, it's clear what the contours are. It's basically restoring the status quo ante. That's the only way it's going to happen. There was a deal, remember. We're just restoring an existing deal.
Well, it sounds like he went...
And what Israel wants to do is run out the clock because, Iran has presidential elections in 2 months.
Sounds like Israel took a giant step to restoring the status quo ante. It blew up all the machines that were built recently.
No,
I'm joking. I don't think it was.
Yeah,
true.
okay, good. I mean, the thing you haven't talked about at all, which is highly relevant to all this, is the domestic political situation in Iran. I don't want to get into it, but it is the factor that Americans and Israelis habitually neglect.
What was your brilliant identity politics point?
Oh, at this point, I'm not sure we have time. Maybe I'll save it for the Parrot Room.
Yeah, okay.
What time? Wait, let me see. How long have we been doing
An hour, 1 minute.
Oh, my God, that's so long.
Can I bring up my one point about the harmonic convergence between my two pet issues?
By all means.
My two pet issues are stopping unregulated immigration that lowers America's wages and stopping a child allowance that would recreate the perverse subsidies to an underclass that we thought we'd ended when we reformed welfare in 1996.
Wait, what was the first one?
Immigration control. The second one is stopping the Biden dole-like Biden child allowance.
Okay, immigration welfare. Yeah,
One of the there's this thing called the Republican Study Group. There's a Congressman, Jim Banks, who runs it, and he came out with a statement on why we should oppose Biden's immigration policy. And basically, in one sentence, it said it was undermining America's workers. So, of course, Breitbart and the people on my side took this one sentence and said, see, they're shifting in a populist direction. The good Republican message is populist defense of the working class and the poor, which I agree with. But then the problem is that if you adopt that strategy, it creates a perverse incentive when it comes to the child allowance, because one reason, the great mystery is why haven't Republicans opposed this child allowance? It's very much like welfare. They know how to run against welfare. As a reporter told me, the cookbook is on the shelf. They just have to take the cookbook off the shelf, run against welfare. It's worked before. Why aren't they doing it? The answer is a lot of them think they are J.D. Vance-like populists who are helping people where they live, not helping people not places, but they're helping people in the communities where they live. Mm-hmm. And they're fighting income inequality. And they think that this child allowance sort of fits in with the new Jim Banks-style Republican study group rationale that Republicans are the party of the working class.
Horseshoe theory.
So, right. But it's a completely perverse horseshoe theory because it embraces the dole, which we thought we'd gotten rid of, and the idea that it's going to help deplorables and out of work and relatively impoverished working class people in the heartland to put them on the dole is insane. I mean, it's also going to give them more money to buy fentanyl. I mean, the idea that it's going to cause a long-term improvement in their societies is crazy. The key question is, will J.D. Vance embrace this child allowance? And I think it could go either way. He's signed an embrace of a child allowance in the past, but he said some things recently that imply that he knows there's a difference between being at a certain level of income because you have a job and you earn it, and being at a certain level of income because the state sends you a check every month. Let's hope he takes that latter course. And he,
you can imagine that in your scenario where this is actually bad for the people he should want to help, it still made them inclined to vote for him, right? That's possible.
In the short run, yes. Yeah, those would be the good angels and the bad angels
of his
fighting
nature.
on his shoulders. But, Ron Brownstein says, how can the Republicans hurt the very people who support them, the white, unskilled, non-college educated deplorables? Well, the answer is it doesn't help them. It helps destroy their society, not boost their society up. And J.D. Vance has a plan, apparently, to boost their society up. He wants to start a high-tech industry in the Midwest with a series of, well-placed centers of expertise in institutions of higher learning in the Midwest. One of them is Grinnell College, which was subsidized by Mr. Noyce of
semiconductor
Intel.
fame.
Yeah, so that's already a center of knowledge, and you could maybe build an industry out of that, and that would give people jobs, not just a dole.
Yeah, not to change the subject, but if Jeff Bezos were somebody other than who he is, when he was deciding where to put his, remember that big show he did? We're going to build all these new Amazon headquarters, come and apply, and then I'll piss off almost all of you by not moving our stuff there. Right. I had this fantasy. Now, I admit it, my fantasy partly included him turning a couple of swing states blue in the process, but still, you can imagine, at least, you can imagine building something in the heartland of enduring significance.
But they've determined that the leading determinant for where corporations put their headquarters is where the CEO wants to live. Bezos had a even better rationale, which is I have to go where the techies want to live. And the techies don't want to live. Right,
that's why the whole thing was such a fraud.
The techies don't want to live in Grinnell, Iowa.
Yeah, he was going to wind up with a place in New York and a place in Washington, and,
the Washington place wasn't necessary. I think that he has roots in Washington. That's the problem.
D.C.?
Yeah.
Well, he grew up in Texas, didn't he?
I don't know. I think he has some roots in Washington.
Well, he's got lobbying to do in Washington. There's that.
They don't need the techies. They should have said Marfa, Texas, and had all the hip techies go to Marfa, Texas.
Absolutely. They
actually can't do that because Marfa doesn't have any land. It's wedged in by an army base. But go ahead.
So you're still seeing J.D. Vance as like a big political figure, huh?
Not just me. Now that this week the world is caught up to me. He's on everybody's lips. He's about to declare for Senate in Ohio. Some people seem to think he's going to win, and it doesn't seem to me that easy for him to win because he's running against a Trumpist who's ahead in the polls, I think, and Trump might endorse the Trumpist. So then J.D. Vance is fucked. So I hope he wins. I'm for him. He seems like generally a very sensible fellow. He has become a little more, he's taken 2 steps in the Tucker Carlson direction in preparation for this campaign. But I'll forgive him for that.
Wait, what does that mean? He's done what?
Well, he's written tweets like the one you objected to.
Yeah.
That are semi... I'm not going to supply the adjective, but they're irresponsible, Bob.
Well, as long as this has been our foreign policy edition, I might as well note that there's actually a point about that Walter Russell Mead piece I meant to make, and I'll just quickly make it. He's complaining, compounding tensions with Washington. Last month, the Chinese and Russian foreign ministers announced their intention to deepen their relationship. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov hailed China as a true strategic partner of Russia. The Chinese government-backed newspaper Global Times sees no upper limits to Sino-Russian cooperation. Well, Walter, I hope you understand that the policies you champion, which is the United States does more and more antagonistic stuff to Russia and China, will tend to drive them together. If you don't like that, then don't champion the stuff you champion. I rest my case.
I don't think he sees himself as antagonizing Russia and China.
No, I'm sure he support. I'll bet you anything if he has complaints about these sanctions, it's that they weren't harsher. I'll bet you he's totally on board with the way Blinken and Sullivan handled the run up to Anchorage. And if anything, he wants us to be harsher and more rhetorically antagonistic, more in the way of sanctions, guaranteed. Don't you think?
No, I don't think guaranteed. I actually don't know what he thinks about that, but I think he could go. Because he's always for doing things with finesse and skill and not necessarily... He doesn't always opt for the cruder.
Okay, then I take it all back. I apologize.
The answer is I don't know.
I'm sorry.
His main role, which is now sort of over, was he was the person who explained Trump's foreign policy to people in ways that were more coherent than even Trump explained them. Now I guess he's shifting into critiquing Biden's foreign policy when nobody else will, and that's a reasonable thing to do too. But I'm not so sure he's a knee-jerk,
Well, if he is a Trump, if he's literally a Trumpist in the sense of doing what Trump would do, it would be, well, if he's a Bannonite. Oh, that reminds me of a Parrot Room talk. If he's a Bannonite, he would favor being tough on China, but not so tough on Russia, and for that matter, if he's Trump. Anyway,
he did say that it was a good thing that Russia is turning to China, because if they thought China was stronger than the U.S., they'd be turning to us to fight China. I'm not quite sure I buy that, but
good.
That's what he said.
Not good in the sense of a development whose consequences he welcomes, as a development whose underlying logic he thinks is flattering to us. But,
yes, correct.
So it will be on to the Parrot Room now. By the way, did you notice we blew through that 800 mark?
I noticed we were at 800.
It's like we're 814 or something.
Right.
And I wrote down the 800 patron's name because I know you did want. What was it you promised? A foot massage?
No, I forget what it was.
I've got the name.
It was something. It's on tape, so we can look it up.
I think it was a foot massage.
No,
I'm pretty sure. Anyway, so there's Parrot Room is accessible via patreon.com/Parrot Room. Some things I want to talk about. I will do this identity politics /Israel-Iran thing. It's genius, folks. It's genius. You don't want to miss it. We didn't talk about the COVID. We should. This whole controversy over the J&J vaccine, for example, and state of that generally. I want to trash Jeffrey Goldberg a little more. Last week in the Parrot Room, I didn't quite exhaust my list of things he did that helped get us into the Iraq War and ways other media outlets were supportive of his efforts. Could talk a little about Bernie Madoff. He died.
Yeah. I have some things to talk about. The amazing stats of admissions to Princeton.
4%.
And there's a small anti-Jeffrey Goldberg aspect of that too, Bob. You'll be interested.
Excellent.
How the Dominion lawsuit may be bankrupting Fox's competitors. So Fox may like the fact that Dominion Voting Systems is suing everybody that dissed them in the wake of the 2020 election. We have the bizarre continuing efforts of Twitter to silence critics of, in this case, of the Black Lives Matter leader who bought a house. How dare she? So those things are a bundle of excitement.
And speaking of BLM, there's, of course, the Chauvin trial continues, but also there's that the other killing by a cop in the area that has, you might say, heightened tensions.
The Chauvin trial defense is arrested. Do you think the killing, this horrible killing where the cop claimed she was reaching for her taser with some evidence do you think that the jurors heard that, and that just sort of makes a fair trial impossible, doesn't it?
I think they're supposed to like not read the news or something. I think that's the instructions. I don't know how successful they could. I don't know how they could miss this story.
They have cell phones, right? I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds. If they want to do it, they'll do it. But if your theory is right that the verdict will be shaped by their feeling political pressure, which I'm not sure about, you would think this would heighten it because they will think this makes the environment more incendiary. I don't know. But anyway, I want to talk about that just a little.
We can talk about that.
Also, finally, I want to talk about, and maybe even play you an excerpt from a Steve Bannon podcast. This is Horseshoe Theory, Naomi Wolfe and Steve Bannon together. She says, quote, "Can I call you Steve?" Now, this is not Naomi Klein. This is Naomi Wolfe. They're easy to get mixed up, but they both are thought of as on the left. Yeah. Naomi Wolfe was an advisor to Al Gore.
We can talk about that. That sounds promising, and in terms of insanity, and there's also an actual substantive interesting issue of whether Biden should try to expand Medicare or shore up the Obamacare structure. It's
there's
going
actually,
on right now.
If you want to do some dueling substantives, there's a substantive issue with Naomi Wolfe and Steve Bannon. It's like whether she claims that these the vaccine passports are the road to a social credit system like China's. Substantive.
I'm beginning to think I'll do well in a social credit system, so maybe I should be for it.
You would do great.
No, I wouldn't.
No, I was kidding.
I'd be punished because I left from the rear door of my house.
There's a lot of stuff. I think we can get to all of it. We hope.
Okay.
In the Parrot Room. Also, we should plug your newsletter, Kausfiles, mine, Nonzero. My David Sager cyber hacking piece, by the way, in that periodical is relevant to these Russia sanctions. And then if people want to rate and review the Wright Show, they should feel free. Or if they want to click the, what do they say, smash the like button on YouTube?
It's always smash the
like button.
Yeah,
smash. Smash the like button.
Okay, well, are we through? That ought to keep the little buggers happy.
Yeah, now I am going to press the buttons in the right order this time, so that will only be on, what you just said will only be on there because you wanted it to be on there. I'm actually going to, when we say goodbye, I'm going to click stop record this time.
Okay, we both know we hate our audience, Bob.
Speak for yourself.
We're like Lawrence O'Donnell.
Does he hate his audience? You know him. You can't say that. He was at my book party that you helped organize.
The suspicion is that Lawrence is an old-style New Deal Democrat who actually isn't all that woke.
Huh.
But
imagine.
I would have no inside information on this.
We will hear Mickey's inside information in the Parrot Room. Okay. See you in the Parrot Room, Mickey.
Okay. See you, Bob.